Good morning, everyone, and welcome to No Capes, the show where we talk creator-owned comics with creators who own comics. Today I have Skylar Patridge, who is an amazing artist, joining me from the States. Skylar, if you'd like to tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Yeah. I'm Skylar Patridge. I am a New Mexico-based comic artist. I'm currently working on Resonant, that's coming back in December. Artist on that, and then I am also working on an OGN through Dark Horse, hopefully soon to be announced later this year. It's sort of a YA fantasy, modern fantasy story. And then next year, I'll also be working on Volume from Scout Comics, and that's a YA dystopian future, punk music, big splashes of color, lots of fun stuff. So a lot of stuff in the works about to come out. I
That
was
does sound
also
good.
artist on Relics of Youth last year for people who are familiar with that from Vault. So,
Cool. I really like modern fantasy stories, actually,
mhm.
so that's really cool. I'm going to be watching out for that.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a lot of fun. It's uh, sort of a magic returns to the modern world, sort of a modern fantasy in that way. So you've
Yes.
got a very familiar world that these characters exist in, and they're suddenly having to deal with dragons and warriors and haunted crossbows and things like that. So it's a lot of fun.
Yes, I love that. I'm writing something like vaguely similar, but it's my like long-term project when I'm free and
Yeah.
actually know how to draw dogs. I
It
made
takes
the
time.
mistake
I'm not
of
very good at them either.
yeah, I made the mistake of writing my main character being an anthropomorphic pug.
Oh, that's amazing though.
Yeah. So and then I started drawing a concept art for it, and I was like, oh, I don't know how to draw dogs. Oops.
Yeah. A pug is
Um,
pretty challenging too. All the
yeah,
wrinkles and
they
everything. So,
really are. So I've been paying a lot of attention to Mike Norton since I made that
okay.
decision with
Nice.
Battle Pug and Grumble and
Definitely.
yeah. Whereas mine's actually it's a bit further in the future.
Hmm.
So instead of being super familiar world, it's like not post-apocalyptic, but the next stage of society.
Right.
It's a
Okay.
sort of a not quite utopian, but idyllic future where fossil fuels and everything have been banned,
Right.
and
So it's a
so
positive future.
yeah, we're
It's not
running on like
dystopia necessarily.
exactly running on
Yeah.
like a combination of magic and green energy.
Okay.
So
Cool.
I still got a lot of research and a lot of writing to do, but it's going to be a fun romp, I think.
Definitely. Well, I think every creator has that project that's like in their back pocket that they're going to chip away at for a while and
Yeah,
someday unleash it on the world, hopefully.
exactly. I think I'm going to end up partnering up with somebody else to do the internals, and I'll just do covers or something for that one.
Right, right. That's smart. That would also save you a lot of labor. So
Yeah, I like
doing
doing
all of
things
it is really
myself, but
challenging.
if I don't have to do
Yeah,
everything myself, that
absolutely.
yeah. So today we a little bit of a tangent there, but that is pretty standard for no capes. um, Today we're talking about Lonely Receiver by written by Zac Thompson with art by Jen Hickman and letters by Simon Bowland. Lonely Receiver is a really cool comic that I've really gotten into lately. Uh, Excuse me. I was introduced to Zac Thompson via The Replacer.
Okay.
I'd actually been following him for a little bit on Twitter when I started getting more involved with comics. I went looking for every one of you that I could find. Um, and that was the sort of first major comic I remember Zach promoting, and I bought a copy of that, and it was really cool. I'm looking forward to talking
Nice.
about
Yeah, I've
that.
heard of it. I haven't checked it out yet, though.
Yeah, it's
Hmm.
good. It's like a thick one shot.
Yeah. Awesome.
Um, but yeah, Lonely Receiver is today's comic. Do you want to tell everyone a little bit about it?
Oh, I will try. I feel like Lonely Receiver kind of blew my socks off when I read it earlier this year. Um, it is sort of a near future where things are sort of recognizable. Um, and we're following Katrin and Ryan. And Katrin, it's sort of a future where AI has taken a new. It's it seems like the possible future of what we experience with AI and with our technology now, but it's even more integrated into our person. So you kind of link into a system, and you can basically be assigned a partner, somebody who is with you, and their AI intelligence. And so we're following Katrin through this story as she is sort of severed from this partner. The relationship is starting to crumble, and watching her within this recognizable future, like it seems like where we're kind of headed, but everything's a little bit more futuristic. So there's a lot of relationship drama to start off between this main character and her AI partner, and all of the I don't know. It's its whole own world. I feel like I'm kind of at a loss to try to describe it. Zach
Yeah.
and Jen are probably shaking their heads,
I think we'll
but it's
probably
a
find more
beautiful,
words
beautiful
as we go
book.
through it. But
Yeah, for
yeah, no,
sure.
that's good. And the first thing I noticed that really made me chuckle was their new smartphone things that is what they
Yeah,
use to generate these AIs. And they're like
right.
a squishy, fleshy, hairy little folding lump.
Yes. Yeah, there's definitely a organic nature to a lot of the technology in this story, and I think that that's it feels kind of Cronenberg-esque, and it's interesting and kind of off-putting in a way, because it's familiar as our fleshy bodies, that we're sort of integrating this technology into ourselves. It's
Yeah,
becoming part of us and not something that we go to. It's something that's sort of with us all the time.
exactly. I've got page one open here, and immediately um, I had kind of forgotten that this was done. But I love what Jen has done here. It's an even more advanced execution of things that I'm trying to do in my own work in like bringing cinematography, it's like cinematic style and photographic elements into illustration here with the
Hmm.
Dutch angles on
Yeah,
in the middle two panels.
yeah.
Um, I'm trying to experiment with pulling focus
Hmm.
in my art. So I accidentally did a soft focus on a piece when I was at university last year because we were studying photography at the same time as I was working on this portrait that I had to do.
Yeah.
And I was just like doing some things that I thought would look cool. And then once I finished it, I realized that I'd done like a fuzzy focus on the background and then a really crisp focus on the figure in the foreground. And I
Yeah,
was like, okay, that's something I want to experiment with more in the future. And I love it when I can see that in other artists' work because it
definitely.
shows me that it's something that can be done really well and
Yeah.
that I really want to learn how to do. And I really like how immediately they set the tone that everything's not okay before you even
Yeah.
read the dialogue by putting those Dutch angles and the sort of ominous orangey tones.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like Jen's ability as an artist is truly amazing. I actually had a chance to meet them years ago at a show, and I was actually too nervous to go talk to them. um,
Yeah, but yeah, I like how they set that up immediately that not everything is okay before you even read that they're having an argument. You can
mhm.
see that something's wrong.
Yeah, things are off kilter. And I think that they continue that through the story. Like there is a sense of sort of ill at ease, of growing dread all the way through, and it's done from everybody on the creative team. From the writing itself to Jen's work to the lettering. Like there is this growing sense of something building, and it's sort of a sense of dread, and also like you really want to know what's happening,
Yeah.
um, and you really want to know what. It's hard to say who is necessarily the villain or the victim in this story.
Yeah.
There really isn't one, and so you're kind of trying to figure out like, do we want to do we want to support Katrin? Are we really pulling for her? Are we not? It's kind of hard to tell, and I think the artwork, the writing, and the lettering sort of all does that. Just subconsciously, like as you read it, you're taking all of that in without necessarily even
Yeah.
realizing it.
Yeah, and I love here for the more sort of secondary page, we've got she's obviously very emotional and everything's not okay, but then they're using sort of inside outside the by lighting sort of effect.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think the colors in this whole story are really, really incredible. There is that moving back and forth between the organic, there's organic palettes, and there are these really like neon palettes, and they go back and forth between the two, sort of conflicting with each other. Like you, our own organicness, you know, versus the technology of the world that they exist in.
Yeah, and that's it. Like at first, when like you said, you're not sure whether Katrin is in the right or the wrong.
Hmm.
Um, and I guess I'll do that spoiler warning now. We're going to go through issue 1 at the moment, everyone, but we are going to talk about things that happen at other points in the comic. So if you haven't read it yet, and you don't want spoilers, go read it. Issue 1, I believe, is free on Comixology at the moment. If not, it'll be very cheap. I didn't actually check whether it's free at the moment before we started, but they usually have worked out. Almost every single episode we've done so far, their first issue of the comic has been free at the time.
Awesome.
So really good timing.
Definitely worth
Go
checking
check
out.
it out on Comixology. I will link it in the description for YouTube as well. I will try to grab the link without upsetting my setup here too much as well, to the store, and pop it in the chat. But if you haven't read it and don't want spoilers, come back later. If you haven't read it and don't mind spoilers, stick around. But yeah, I figured on that note, you know, as things go along, you realize that Katrin is definitely part of the problem, but not
Yeah.
necessarily on purpose.
Yeah. I think that's a good
She,
way to describe it.
yeah, she's obviously dealing with some stuff, but not in the healthiest way.
For sure. And I think it's relatable. She's a relatable character, as we are sort of all not necessarily beholden, but we're all sort of dependent upon technology. And this is obviously a near future where you have to be plugged into the network in some way. You're nobody without it.
Yeah,
You know, the sort of iPhone replacements in this story are kind of everything. Like it's an incredibly big deal to have that and have it be healthy. Like that's going back to that organicness. Like you kind of have to take care of this technology in a way that we don't really do right now because it's still
yeah,
very mechanical. And so that's this. It's familiar technology, but it's in kind of a creepy way. So there's that. It kind of plays into that whole building dread, building horror element to the story.
yeah. Exactly. It does. It gets more uncomfortable every issue, for because you can see that Katrin is kind of spiraling.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, she starts getting illegal body mods. And
Right. Yeah, that's the other part of the story is like you've got very mainstream body modification to some degree, and the little like nodes that they put on Katrin's head and how these all sort of tie you into the network. And it's interesting to watch her sort of try to deal with what's real and what's not, and how she fits into this world, I think. Because she seems very, I think when the book starts, she seems very alone and dependent on this AI in a way that like she desperately needs companionship, and she's desperately afraid of losing that companionship. And I think that's relatable as well, especially
yeah.
with how isolated everybody has been this year.
Oh
We're
yeah.
very dependent on connection with people, you know, the Zooms and Twitter and some way to connect with people. And it seems like within this story that technology has become so vital that you almost don't exist if you aren't part of that network, if you aren't part of social media, part of technology in some way.
Yeah, no, and that's sort of how things feel right now. Like you said, you
Yeah.
know, like we we can't go out and see all the people we would normally see.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're not existing in the digital space,
Right.
it
And I
can
think even
very much feel like
outs
you don't exist.
yeah, when even outside of the quarantine, I think there is that pressure to remain connected. Um, and the saying of like, well, if you didn't tweet about it, did it happen? If you didn't post it on Facebook, did it happen? Sort of in jest, but there is also that sort of pressure to constantly be putting yourself out there,
Yeah.
whether you're a creator or whether you're just somebody who has social media.
Yeah, exactly. I've definitely felt the pressure as a creator to be extremely online TM.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
and it's
and I
another
try,
job for sure.
yeah, it really is. Especially like
Yeah.
I work in industry as well as being a creator, so most of my day right now is spent here, right at this table,
Yeah.
creating content, scheduling content, researching content, and then I go away and you've got to be ready to answer replies and things at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
Um, thankfully, most people obviously are pretty okay with waiting till the next day for you to get back to them, but
Hmm.
not everyone.
Right. Well, and it can be one of those things too, where when you get a notification or an email or whatever, there's that pressure like to get back right away, to where it can take up your whole day. It can become a whole part of your life trying to just correspond, um, let alone try to do the work on the side on top of that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And immediately, like, not, was it 4 pages in, I think, here? Straight into the body horror.
Yeah, which I love.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And Jen does such an amazing job at it. Like,
yeah,
their
they really
colors
did.
paired with their work is just so good.
Yeah,
Um,
the scene where um, Katrin just starts making out with the not even fully formed yet.
yeah, that desperation for connection.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that's so great about the story too is that you've got these horror elements and this sense of dread, but it's so saturated. You've
it
got
is.
the very vibrant palettes, that you would, with subject matter that you would assume would be sort of grim and dark and maybe just blue tones or green tones or gray tones even. But you've got these rainbow palettes on here that I think make it even, it adds an extra element of like disease
Yeah,
as you move through the
exactly.
story. Yeah. It's like a neon horror. It's very, very cool.
And that's what I love. My favorite sort of scary comics recently have been the ones that still keep their world vibrant
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
alive. Like the washed out sort of color palette might work for the movies, but even
Hmm.
then, I still prefer movies with horror where everything is still vibrant and colorful and alive, but you're using shadow and
Yeah.
light and angles to create that sense of foreboding rather than a color grading.
Yeah,
It
definitely.
feels more whole
Hmm.
and more
Well, I think
immersive.
we're all used to seeing, dark, scary, monochrome or desaturated scary stories, and it's kind of it feels fresh and new and in a different way scary to see
Yeah,
these like saturated tones, on top of these scary stories. So,
and that's what I love about it because it feels more like hey, this could be anyone. This could happen to anyone. This is the
right.
normal world. Look at all the color.
Yeah.
Oh, bam! Here's something scary.
Yeah.
Instead
Well,
of
that's, going back to the future of this story. Like it's futuristic, but not so futuristic that it doesn't seem recognizable. And that's,
yeah,
I think, where technology based horror that still feels recognizable is very scary, I think.
yeah.
we're on that
Friendo did that
we're
well
on
as
that
well.
crazy trajectory of technology dependence right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Friendo for that reason as well. Like, it
Yeah.
had a lot of
That
those
was a
sort of
great one.
elements
Very bright
with
colors too. Yeah.
with the little avatar that only you can see.
Yeah. Right. Well, and I think that that's, talking about Lonely Receiver and Friendo, there's sort of that sense that because it's bright and because it's not like there's you can kind of see everything. There's really not shadows obscuring things. Um, that there is a sense within you that you want to relax because you can see everything. It's bright, but there's also this very present understanding that something really awful is about to happen, or could happen at any moment, or we're building towards something scary. And so you're kind of always uncomfortable in the I think in like saturated horror stories because I think we equate brightness and color with safety, not necessarily safety, but um, good things. And so having that juxtaposition against this sort of grim, escalating story, I think is very successful in keeping you uncomfortable. Talking more, like, kind of circling back on the whole like Dutch angles making things feel topsy turvy. You've
Yeah.
got that color juxtaposition. I think that continues to make you feel uncomfortable without maybe you knowing it in the moment.
Yeah, no, no, it's exactly right. And like the blue, all the constant blue, it's a very nice color, but it, I find it does sort of emphasize that something, cold and distant is growing.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, and then you've got the specter that starts to appear later on in the first issue,
Yes.
which I think is very very cool.
Yeah, I liked that a lot. It was very Mr. Nobody.
Yeah. Well, and it's yeah, it's like is it there? Is it in her mind? Is it? It's a very interesting character to sort of introduce, and I think again just plays into that sense of like it's a personified thing of the growing disease that the reader is most likely feeling as they're going through this story. So, well, now
Exactly.
there's suddenly a specter in the background, like
Yeah, especially in that the most recent one that you and I got to read.
yes.
Yeah, shit gets
things
real
get
weird.
things get pretty intense in issue 4.
They really do. It's like it's just like Zach and Jen just cranked it up to 12.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I feel like they very much have escalated the sense. It's an erotic horror as well. I think that's something we should probably talk about.
Yes, it is.
So they're really upping that erotic element in the story, but the horror is never gone. Like it
Yeah.
still feels uncomfortable. It's not necessarily like sexy eroticism.
No.
It's uncomfortable to read
Yeah, it is.
it
It is.
in a good
It's
way.
yeah. It's sort of yeah. Like just so everybody knows, there's obviously no non-consensual stuff or anything like that. But it is
Right.
like it's you get a feeling of, is this really what you want? Is this actually
Hmm.
the choice that you're making, or do you think this is the choice you need to make?
Yeah.
Like, are you doing this because it's your real desire, or is this desperation and more of that desperation for connection?
Right.
And that's sort of what makes it uncomfortable. It's like Catherine's making consensual, conscious decisions, but the motivation behind those decisions is questionable.
Absolutely. And I think that you see that a lot in our own experience with technology is trying to decide how you want to use it, how it's using you, self-destructive habits with our technology. And I think you see Katrin struggle with that a lot in trying to. I think you see her struggle with wanting to not be so reliant on it, but also needing that connection, desperately wanting Ryan, this AI counterpart that she had, and her kind of going to any lengths to keep that connection, even if it's not true.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's. I think that Zach and Jen have done a very good job at showing something very human within a world that feels sort of. I'm not exactly sure the word I want to use there. It's sort of there are elements of it that feel like facsimiles of people and of society, and I think seeing this very human experience of wanting connection and struggling to keep it, I think is very it's done very successfully.
It is.
And like I said, Ketron I think is very relatable because of that. But at the same time, it's you watch. We will always, with everything we do, we watch our favorite characters like make horrible decisions, and Ketron is kind of continuously struggling to make the right decision, but not doing it. Um, so
Yeah.
you want to love her, but she keeps doing these bad things.
Yeah, she's always swinging and missing.
Yeah, I do. I also think it's interesting to see how Zach and Jen have created AI in this world, and that it is tangible. It's sort of that. It sort of feels like Ex Machina mixed with she or her. What is it? The one with Phoenix, Joaquin Phoenix, Scarlett Johansson.
Oh,
He's
I don't
got the
think I've seen
voice
that one.
box that he talks with. I think it's her. But anyway, it's sort of it feels like there's sort of a mixture of those two. I always kind of
Mm,
hate to equate creative media with somebody else's vision of something, but I see some parallels between connection with things that aren't necessarily real,
yeah,
or in the sense that we consider them real. They are artificial intelligence, and the dependency that we get with them, and it's cool to see their interpretation of where they think AI is headed, how interactive it will become, how much it'll affect our lives, how much it will change us.
exactly. And I feel like I don't know if it's a deliberate nod by them or not, but there's almost a nod to Demolition Man
Oh yeah, I could see that.
in that when they actually are intimate together, they just sort of they retreat into that AI virtual reality, the garden,
Yeah,
and everything happens there. You don't really see a lot of them being physically intimate in the real world.
yeah. It's sort of almost like they exist in this void.
Yeah,
That's something I think is very very cool that they've created in this story is where you go when you sort of tap into the garden. Like,
yeah,
what is the garden, and how does it change? Like, how does it change you? How is it affecting your life when you're not walking around on the street? You're basically retreating into an alternate reality, for pleasure.
yeah, and exactly. And I thought that was really interesting because like Ryan, I'm not sure exactly how it's supposed to
I've been
be.
reading it as Ryan. I hope that's
Yeah,
right.
um, has a physical presence.
Yeah,
It does have a. I'm not sure what it's made of
right. I
because
think
it.
it's kind of unclear. It feels like it seems to be still made. Ryan still seems to be made of organic material in a way,
Yeah,
but it's like the soul isn't there almost.
yeah, and that's it. It's like, is it? I also found that interesting, especially with the way the eyes triplicate when she's in the
Mm-hmm.
garden. I'm like, okay, so is Ryan organic? Is it a hard light construct, or or what? But either way, she has a physical presence, and yet they still go into the garden when they're being intimate.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have those options, but
Right.
that's where it goes
Yeah, it's like a
instead.
different plane, different plane of pleasure, I guess,
Yeah,
aside from your physical interactions. Yeah.
and I kind of resonated with some of the arguments here a lot. Um, Not in the whole, literally being elsewhere and doing other things thing, but um, where Katrin is upset with Ryan because she's elsewhere, really felt like a lot of issues that I've had with my ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
And like, no matter, even though I'm trying to be present in the moment and listen to my partner, whoever I'm talking to, or whatnot, my brain will decide to go on a journey.
Right.
And so, like, I can understand Katrin's frustration because I have been the Ryan in that situation, but not for the same reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Like the not paying attention, being elsewhere, but not doing it deliberately, but like that whole disagreement that they had felt very familiar to me for
Right.
those reasons of struggling with my own symptoms of my ADHD.
Yeah. And that's something I think is very cool with the story is that the relationship turmoil is very familiar, I think, for a lot of people. Just it's a human thing, but Katrin is having this with an AI.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big problem for Katrin in that she feels like this is her. It's kind of that idea of like, what's yours? And
Mm-hmm.
who do who belongs to us? I think that is something that Ketrin struggles with a lot. Is she feels like
Yeah.
Ryan belongs to her.
Yeah, she does have a possessive tendency.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of how it's sold in this world. Is like you hook into the system and you get this companion, and they're your companion, and they are there for you. And Ryan is sort of broken free of that mindset and is being an AI can tap into the system and connect with any number of other individuals, be they other AI or other people.
Mm.
And so I think Katrin feels even more isolated by that because she wants this connection with Ryan, and Ryan has the ability to connect with anybody.
Yeah. And
So,
and that's the thing as well, is that it is never really addressed and indicated whether that's an actual normal function of
right,
these AI partners, or if Ryan has gone rogue essentially. Like
right. And I think
like
that seems to be they kind of I think hint at it that that's possible. But when she goes to sort of speak to somebody about trying to fix this, they seem kind of thrown off by the fact that this has happened. That
yeah,
her AI
exactly.
has wandered away, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, a few people seem kind of surprised, but they don't immediately raise alarm bells. So, and it does make you wonder, like, oh, is this a thing that can happen but doesn't really, or is this a
Right.
thing that's not supposed to happen, and Ryan is a singularity?
Right. Yeah.
Um,
It's unclear so far.
yeah, yeah, it's never quite revealed so far. They might touch on that as they start to escalate things,
Yeah.
but not so far. And and then obviously we do get to the point where it starts to develop into an obsessive and unhealthy thing where she tries to use the phrase on Ryan in the middle of the argument, which obviously that is like the final straw for Ryan, because she didn't want to be there yet. She didn't want to
Right.
go there in that moment,
Yeah.
and Katrin sort of forced the hand.
Yeah.
Um, just for the sake of Twitch, I'm going to skip over a couple pages because I don't know whether the terms and services will crack me.
Reported.
Yeah, I haven't had any issues so far, but I've had to be careful with a couple of comics where I was flicking through and suddenly boobs or suddenly money shot. We did a whole episode on money shot, and I was just like,
Nice.
"Oh man, which pages am I going to have to skip
See
in?"
like black bars everywhere.
Yeah. Actually, sorry, that episode's coming up. It's next week's episode, I think. So
Okay.
I'm going to go through the issue in a hit and just note down the pages that I need to
Nice.
not show on screen, just in case Twitch smacks me in the wrist.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and so towards the end here, we do see some instances of actual physical intimacy
Yeah.
as well. So I guess like you said, the garden is the next evolution.
Right. It's sort of like
Um,
the ultimate place that you go to for like the deepest connection with your counterpart.
yeah,
But yeah, I think it's sort of watching Ketrin spiral. Like you come into this as a in the middle of a breakup, basically,
yeah,
and then it's following one character as they sort of spiral out of control, and realizing how dependent they were, and like you said, the obsession. Like there is an obsession to Katrin's connection with Ryan, and that can be horror in and of itself. Is people's unhealthy obsessions with people or things, and so you've got that. You've got the body horror, you've got erotic horror, you've got obsession based horror. It's a cocktail of things that are
It is.
scary and uncomfortable in a very real way.
Exactly. And then they have,
Yeah.
another argument following their trip to the garden. And
Yeah.
that's where Katrin starts to get physical.
Hmm.
And that's obviously the final straw for Ryan, because she literally disappears.
Yeah.
She just leaves. And then suddenly the foam thingy, which I didn't notice had started to crack before, has suddenly developed more of a crack or a visible vein on it, and the hairs have all fallen down and it's turned pallid and grey,
Yeah.
and immediately sort of a visual indicator of just how wrong this situation is.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think I didn't realize until I got to that moment how organic the device is.
Yeah,
That it's basically something she has to care for, and when her partner, when Ryan is gone or disconnects from her, essentially, it's like it dies. So
yeah,
it's, I don't know, the organic mixed in the technology of the story, I think is a very cool choice, and very unsettling, um, because we don't want to think of our technology as living necessarily, as
no,
something
exactly.
that dies in the same way that like a creature or that we do.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And yet, that's sort of where they go with it, and
Hmm.
it is sort of another reminder that maybe put down the phone sometimes.
Yeah, it's a lesson I should learn. I've been trying to do that more. I think, like I said, with quarantine, you get kind of to feeling like you need to connect.
Yeah,
Um,
that's exactly
you
right.
get sort of weird, yeah, if you're not trying to reach out and talk to people. But it can have the opposite effect as well.
Yeah, and that's exactly like the same here. Like Robin and I are trying to make sure that we spend some time each day away from our devices. It's a little harder at the moment because
Hmm.
I'm working a lot. But I've started trying now that work has slowed down to a more normal pace. I'm trying to insert 1 to 2 hours lunch break every day to make
Nice.
sure I get that time away from work and
Hmm.
spend that time with my partner, and making sure that I don't work too late into the night, which is really easy to do when you
Yeah,
get in the zone. And so
definitely.
really trying to instate those breaks from being online.
Right.
And
Yeah, from the
it
sort of
is
being
it is
plugged in all
hard
the time. Definitely.
because even when you try to spend a day offline, you realize there's always something that you need to do. Like, oh, I forgot to log on and do this thing with my bank. Or,
Hmm.
oh, shoot, I was supposed to be offline today, but I actually realized I've forgotten about that email for 3 days. I have to send it.
Right. Well, and
And
then you get
then,
on and you're like, well, maybe I should check this thing. And then an hour
mm-hmm,
later, you've checked all your social media and gotten angry at something. And
yeah, you get that
then you have to
domino effect going.
disconnect again. Yeah, definitely. Well, I tend to be a very outdoors person. And so when I try to take time away from technology, I try to go outside. And it's got recently gotten cold here. So it's making that harder. It's
Yeah,
not as enjoyable to just go out for a walk or mess around in the yard. Kind of have to bundle up and do that whole thing. So been finding it harder to disconnect as much as I did earlier in the fall and in the summer.
yeah, no, I get that. See, here it's sort of the same issue, but it's late spring here, moving towards
Oh,
summer.
okay.
Um, and I don't know how much time you've spent in Florida, but
Not much, but a little bit.
here right now, it's 83 degrees
Oh, it's a little
and
toasty.
41% humidity. And it's only 11 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's warm.
Yeah. And that's spring.
Yeah.
So
So what are your
summer,
summers like?
I'm in the hundreds for you.
Woof, woof.
Yeah, like an average summer's day in Brisbane is at least 89.
Okay. It's about that way here in New
Yeah.
Mexico. Although
That's
we
a
have like 2% humidity, so just dry up and blow
yeah.
away.
Yeah, 89 and anywhere between 40 to 90% humidity. The other
Humidity's
day,
rough. Yeah.
yeah, like just 2 days ago, it was 87 and 83% humidity at 6 o'clock at night.
Here's
Yeah,
a
and
spring
that's
is you just have two summers.
yeah, essentially. As soon as autumn is over and winter is done, winter only lasts a few weeks, and at most, like our winters are usually about 57.
Yeah.
That's about as cold as it gets in my city in winter.
Yeah.
Sometimes it'll get a few degrees lower, but
Yeah.
that's like cold here is 10 degrees Celsius.
Okay. So no
So,
snow. No snow in Brisbane.
no, never snow in Brisbane. If there was snow in Brisbane, you would know something has gone really wrong.
Right.
Yeah. 50 Fahrenheit is a cold Brisbane day.
Yeah.
And so, same sort of thing. We try to go out, but we have to wait until nighttime now
Yeah.
because otherwise you will just get fried to a crisp.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely places like that here. Like Phoenix is that way. I've been in Phoenix both in the winter and in the summer, and the winter's wonderful. It was like 80 degrees in February, which I'm not sure how that equates to Celsius, but in the summer it's awful. The heat is just terrible. I
But
remember
80
being
degrees is a pretty
outside.
pleasant day.
What's that?
80 degrees is a pretty pleasant day. That's
Yeah,
26
yeah,
Celsius.
yeah. It's a comfortable. It's warm, but it's comfortable. You can walk around in shorts. But in the summer, yeah, it was. I was there for a convention, and it was, I believe, 10 o'clock at night. Group of us were going to dinner, and I believe it was 102 at 10 o'clock at night, and just no escape unless
Yeah.
you're inside. So it's a little too hot for me.
Okay. Yeah, someone's asked where the story takes place, and it's sort of an indeterminate city. Yeah, it's just sort of it could
It's a
be
sizable city, of course,
yeah,
but
it's a big city, but it's never discussed or revealed where that city is or what that city's called. So it could be anywhere. It could be any country. It could be any city. Um, this is actually one of the stories I really like for that reason. Is that I've been having a lot of trouble this year with a lot of comics being very, very, very specifically American.
yeah.
There are so many things that just go over my head because I don't know any of these places. And there's like very specific cultural things unique to those locations in the stories and experiences unique to being American that I sort of had a hard time connecting with. So I've really enjoyed finding stories like this where it's just in any city.
Right. Definitely. Well, I would assume it would be challenging being in Australia, and there is such a large comic book industry in the United States. So much of comics, especially mainstream stuff, comes out of the United States. So I'm sure that that is kind of, it feels a little like on the outside with a lot of stories. So,
Yeah, and then there's not much of a comic book industry here. There are quite a few of us that are comics creators, but we mostly work with other people overseas and publishers overseas. And so even a lot of Australian writers and Australian artists are still creating those American stories
right.
because that's where the work is. So
Hmm.
it's very rare to find a story that is. I don't even necessarily want a uniquely Australian story, because Australiana is its own issue,
Hmm.
but just some more stories set in other locations with just human experiences
For sure. Like a
rather than
hypothetical.
specific cultural
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that Lonely Receiver has done a very good job at making this feel um, like it could be any city. It feels familiar enough to, I think, most people,
Yeah.
whether be you from Australia, be you from the United States, wherever.
No, I didn't even really, I didn't even really question it until somebody
Yeah.
asked.
Hmm.
Um, oh, hello, Capricorn Banana. They said hi to both of us and hope everyone is doing well.
Hello. Thank you.
Yeah, that's it. Until someone asked us just now, I didn't even consider the location.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it myself. So,
So I really like stories that do that. It's just one of the
hmm.
reasons why I've been reading so much indie stuff instead, because I can find in their fantasy stories and the sci-fi stories that are
Yeah.
set on entirely other planets and other dimensions and lands, or a completely reformatted Earth where those nations don't really exist anymore.
Right. And I think that that's definitely something that's very successful with this story. Because we talked about it a little bit with the technology too. Is like there is a familiarity to everything that you're seeing, but there's also an unfamiliarity with certain things. I'm looking at the eyes that kind of start
Oh,
popping up toward the end of issue
I
one.
just got to that page actually.
Hmm. And if you, I noticed if you go back, I noticed this when I was looking at the first issue just this morning. They're kind of, I believe they're supposed to be the peepholes of the windows or of the doors as she's walking down that hallway in the first page. I
Mm,
believe they're supposed to be the peepholes, but they almost look like the eyes that are looking at her toward the end of the issue.
yeah.
And so this kind of sense that eyes feel very important throughout the story, and that you're kind of always being watched to a certain degree, or
They
always
do.
being seen, maybe.
And
Um,
even more so in that new issue that we read,
yeah,
uh, the eyes thing becomes
yeah,
more of a
definitely.
thing in that. Um,
Hmm.
Not going to tell you guys too much about that because it's big spoilers for the new issue that's coming out. We both just got a bit of a lucky preview Zach was kind enough to
Yes,
share with
definitely.
us.
Thank you, Zach.
And the scale and stakes and intensity of everything really jumps in issue 4.
Yeah, absolutely. When I think you start really seeing the ability to be self-destructive with the technology.
Yes.
Like it's sort of like it's obvious from the get-go, I think. If you've read any sci-fi or are into any um, sort of cautionary tales within literature or media, we know how dangerous technology could become in a lot of these stories. And I think it's very clear, like, this could be a very fine line for Katrin to walk, and you start to see things get crazier as this story progresses, and watching what the technology can be, and what it can be used for is very interesting and again scary.
Yeah. No, exactly. And I've got the last page up now where the sort of the ports. I think it's supposed to be a representation of the ports on her head
Hmm.
morphing into the eye, and
Hmm.
then we first see this specter, this shadow, show
Yeah,
up.
right.
And yeah, it's like, is it real? Is it a glitch in her hardware? Is it something that Katrin is imagining as she descends further into her unhealthy state of being?
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't. Even in that most recent issue, I still am not entirely sure what it is, other
Right.
than my suspicions were correct that it's kind of malevolent.
Hmm. I'm glad we're talking about this too, because I was thinking about that this morning while I was reading back through. I was like, I don't know if I know what this is, and I don't know if I missed it, or so I'm glad to hear somebody else talk about it and be like, I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, it showed up, but we haven't been told exactly what it is yet.
Yeah, and honestly, that's one of the scariest things for me with horror is sort of faceless entities that
Yeah,
appear. Yeah, the unseen, or in this case, it's very clearly seen, but it's so in opposition to the saturated world around it
yeah,
that it feels even more malevolent than I think it would in a different story with a different color palette, in a different world.
exactly. And it's like that's it. It's like, is it only seen by her? That
Right.
hasn't been revealed yet either, because it
Hmm.
only sort of shows up when she's alone.
Yeah.
But we don't know if other people would be able to see it if it showed up around them.
Hmm.
And I feel like it gives this world even more of an otherworldly and supernatural element.
Right.
It's like, is this purely a technological thing? Like, is this the next evolution of AI that has gone rogue from the system? Like a ghost in the machine almost, that's
Hmm.
looking to take a shape in the real world? Or
Hmm.
is this something darker and more unknown that has just decided it could manifest through this technology and the routes that people are starting to take?
Right.
Is humanity's experimentation with self modification and technology starting to crack open into realms that we really shouldn't be cracking open into?
Yeah. Well,
But
it's that question of what's scarier, like ourselves or the technology that we've created.
exactly.
Yeah.
And like, it could be any one of those three things. It could be something she's purely created out of whole cloth in her own mind. It could be a rogue AI that's developed outside of the system. Or it could be
Hmm.
something supernatural and malevolent. But it doesn't really matter,
Right.
because either way, it kind of has the same effect.
Something is talking to her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where it came from, it still has the same effect on Katrin.
Yeah. Definitely.
And that is unsettling.
Right. Yeah, I think especially when you don't know whether something is tangible and there or whether it's invented. Um, and the idea that in this world it could be really there, but it's invisible to other people. Like because of we don't really fully understand the nature of the technology that this world has. And she doesn't even really. I think
Yeah,
that
exactly.
you see that more as the story continues is that there is a overconfidence in people's sense that they can control whatever it is that they've created this neural network, and watching Ketchum sort of stumble into potential, maybe they're glitches, maybe they're just parts of this technology that can't really be controlled by our human brains. But I think that's a whole other element of creepy and scary, is watching somebody on accident sort of stumble into dark spots within the technology that they're dependent upon.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is like, if this thing is real and not something she's imagined, and it can get into her devices, that also sort of opens up the possibility that other people could do that. If
Because
they're
that's the
already.
thing. We don't know if this is like an entity that's independent or if it's another person that's talking to her. We really
Yeah,
have no idea where this voice comes from.
exactly. She's stalking Ryan. This could be somebody stalking her.
Hmm. And I
So,
think at some point, does she assume, maybe I'm misremembering that, but I think at some point she almost thinks it might be Ryan as she's
um,
trying to figure out what's going on.
yeah, no,
So,
I think, I don't know if she's done that specifically. I remember that she met that other person, and she thought
yeah.
it was Ryan in a new body.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, there's so much in this story.
Yeah, and I remember that this thing simultaneously, like, encourages her obsession and stalking of Ryan, but also telling her she doesn't love you, she doesn't want to be with you, she's never
Hmm.
gonna love you, she's not yours, she doesn't want you, and it's obviously sending Katrin into even more of a spiral.
right. Which is, it's, I think people have that sort of internal monologue with themselves a lot, is
Yeah.
that you sort of have this angel devil within yourself all the time. And if you're somebody who has anxiety or ADHD or anything like that, where you sort of have an internal monologue of something that feels like you understand it and this is your reality, and then you also have this other internal monologue that might be lying to you, that you kind of have to navigate. And I think that this specter of sorts feels like a manifestation of that to me personally, of the this is your practical mind talking to you, this is what you know, and there's all these other things though. Here's all these other things that may or may not be true, but I'm going to tell them to you confidently.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, that actually takes us to the end of the issue, which is great. 'Cause it always seems to work out that way. One 25-page issue always takes up almost the hour.
Awesome.
So, if you want to recap for the people who weren't here at the start, what have you got coming out?
I am currently working on Resonant, and so Resonant's second arc, number 6, will be coming out next month. And I'm also working on an OGN that should be coming out with through Dark Horse. Should be announced later this year. And so I've got Resonant, YA Modern Fantasy, OGN, and then next year I will be starting on Volume through Scout Comics, which is a YA sort of all ages, probably more YA, but dystopian punk rock story. So sort of taking down the system with punk rock and fighting and superheroes, and it's a lot of fun.
I'm down with that. I'm waiting for The Inevitables at the moment.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that one looks fantastic.
Yeah, I originally wanted to back it for the full hardcover comic and the vinyl.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, I thought about the vinyl too.
Yeah, I looked at
My
it and
bank
then I
account
realized
didn't
how
like it,
much
though.
the exchange rate plus shipping was going to be.
Yeah, yeah, I wouldn't even thought about that. That would have been tricky.
Yeah, it was going to be like $160, including the shipping, to get it to Australia.
Nice.
So I was like,
Yeah, that's a little ouchy.
I'll go with digital for now. So I'm still
Yeah.
really looking forward to reading it. I love
Yeah,
Rihanna's
it looks
work.
beautiful. Yeah, well, and speaking of like hypersaturated stuff, that book looks so bright and vivid,
Yeah.
and Leanna's
And
work's so great.
I don't know if you've
And
seen them,
Jono.
but Liana did a couple of pages for Starless Daydream as well. And
Oh, I haven't. No.
they are fantastic.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew she was in it, but I hadn't seen what she'd done, so that's
Yeah.
super cool.
I think both Frankie and Liana have got a couple of the previews up on
Oh, nice.
their social media.
Cool,
But I
I'll
can't
check
wait.
them
It's coming out in a hardcover now. So
Nice.
I was so happy for Frankie. Like, just before I backed it immediately. I was waiting up all late to go to bed to back it and share it.
Hmm.
And it was already like 50% funded by the time I went to sleep.
Yeah.
And I woke up and it was 130% funded in 4 hours.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah. I mean,
yes.
it's a really awesome story too. Like, and it's a great tagline. The resolution to your favorite anime that never happened.
Yes.
It's awesome.
Yeah. I'm actually working on a pin-up at the moment of Fuku, the main character.
Oh, nice.
Because I did my page, and then looking at everybody else's pages, I just got really excited, and I had an idea. I was like, yeah, I gotta do that. So
Nice.
I'm
And I
just
think
redoing
it's
the
a
inks at
great.
the moment.
Okay.
Sorry.
Very cool. No, I was just gonna say I think it's a great. I'm seeing a little bit more of that with the Kickstarters lately, throughout the year. Creators sort of creating either anthologies or like magazines almost, where
Yeah.
it's multiple types of content. So you've got your pinups, you've got your stories, you've got essays, and I think
Yeah.
that's really cool. Um,
Yeah.
so
I'm
it's
working
not
on an
necessarily
anthology for
worrying
next week.
about
Next year.
what's that?
Sorry. I'm working on an anthology for next year.
Oh, awesome!
It
What's the name
just
of
seems
it?
to be The Network Man.
Okay,
But
very
Network
cool.
is, like your secret agent styles is a period between each letter. So it's
Oh,
an
okay, nice.
Yeah, I haven't decided what that stands for yet, but it's going to be just like a pulpy, schlocky 70s sci-fi
Nice.
spy story, but it's actually near future. So the tech is near future, but the aesthetic of the world is that we never moved past 70s aesthetics for anything.
Okay, that sounds really cool. Yeah. Well, I love a spy story. I'm a sucker for that. I'm actually working on a spy story myself.
Awesome. That sounds really fun. Yeah, the main guy in this is Teddy Valentine,
Oh, okay,
and
nice.
he's very Bond-esque with his clothes, but he's got an old school CRT for a head.
Nice.
And the what was it? The one of the main bad guys, like the opposing agency villain, is Fox Newsom,
Okay, nice.
agent of Murdoch.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that's about as far as I've gotten with it. I'm just sort of creating a world that then other writers and artists can play in that sandbox.
That's really cool.
And
Well,
I'm
then you
going to
get,
write and draw
yeah,
one
getting everybody's
story.
interpretations of stuff is really
Exactly.
neat.
I think it
Yeah.
would just be a really fun thing to do as sort of my first proper outing. But like you were saying, I think I interrupted you. Sorry.
Oh,
It
no,
has
no, you're
been really
fine.
interesting watching all the anthologies and zines and stuff sort of coming together and the new formats that they're taking. Like, I've seen a lot of zines and a lot of new anthologies, but never one quite done in the format that Frankie decided to do, where he's written a whole story and there's about 40 artists on board,
Yeah,
all
yeah,
1 to 2 pages each, and some are pin-ups, some are like schematics and diagrams, and some are like just a couple of headshots and a bit of prose telling more of the story and stuff like that. And it's all going to
yeah.
be
It
really
feels like
interesting.
a study book of another world, and I think that's always
Yeah,
kind of cool when it's not specifically a story. Like you've obviously got a narrative that runs, whether it's short stories or a larger narrative. But then if you've got all these other extra things, it's like this is a very real world that exists, and you've got all these extra little bits that you can kind of file away in your brain around the story, which I think just fleshes everything out. Which is, I think comics can be very, you don't have a lot of time. It's not like a show or a movie where you can sort of explore that world, all the ins and outs of it. You don't have as much time. You usually need to be a little bit more efficient. And so I think when you do a story like Frank, or when you do a book like Frankie did, and you can kind of build the world out with extra bits, that just makes it so much more rich. So I always feel like that's something I want sometimes from comics, and I know with my own stuff where it's like, well, I really want to explore this part of this world that I'm working on, but there's no time for it. So you kind of have to just prioritize the story, and you don't get to do the world building quite so much.
yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I'm really looking forward to it because the way he's done it sort of leaves it open for him to go back and write the rest of the story.
Right. But it's like taking all the research that you do for a story, which can be countless hours, you know, researching a city and its layout, researching, certain types of weapons that might have been used for the time period you pick. Whatever, all that research that you take, you can actually utilize it instead of taking 10% of what you studied and researched and putting that into the story. You can actually put to use all of your research.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, where can everyone find you online?
I am on Twitter as at Sky Patridge and Instagram as the same. That's at Sky Patridge. And then my website is www.skylarpatridge.com. Those are my
Awesome.
big ones. I'm on Facebook, but hardly ever. You're really better off finding me on Twitter and Instagram.
Yep. My Facebook page has more become a repository for my stuff that people can look at if they want to,
That's
because
smart. I should do
I'm
that.
interacting more with everyone on the other platforms.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so I was thinking about getting rid of my creator page on Facebook, but I'm like, no, it's probably good to have it there as sort of a gallery and a resume and portfolio space
Yeah,
for people that might decide to look for me there,
right.
but focus on the other platforms more because that's where
Yeah,
I'm talking with fellow creators and the audience more and that sort of thing.
yeah. You got to prioritize your social medias.
Exactly. It's so much work as it is. So I got to make sure that I'm
Yeah,
putting the energy where it needs to be.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you very, very much for joining me today.
Absolutely.
It's
Thank
been a
you for
pleasure to
having
talk
me.
about this book, and I've wanted to have you on for a while. So,
Oh, well, thank you.
yeah, as soon as Dave was starting to share stuff about Resonant and talking about you way back when you first sort of came on, I was like, oh, that's fantastic. I need to look this person up. And I
Oh.
became aware of you and started looking through your work. I was like, yes, I need to have Skylar on the show.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you reaching out. This has been a lot of fun. And to talk about Lonely Receiver, I'm glad I could finally talk about it a little bit. So I think the first read through of I think issues 1 and 2, I just kind of sat at the kitchen table and thought about it for a while.
Yeah.
Kind of just hit me like square in the face. So everybody check out Lonely Receiver. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. For anyone that's in the chat right now, if you scroll up, you should be able to grab the link. But if you're watching on YouTube, the link is in the description below, along with all of Skylar's links and all of my links. Those of you that are here know I am Sean Sunday, and you can find me at Sean Sunday Art on all social media. And you can join my Discord, which is linked in the chat and in the description below on YouTube. So this has been No Capes. Stay tuned for the next episode, which, if I'm remembering correctly, is Money Shot with Adam Markowicz. And we will see you next Friday again at 10 a.m. Bye for now.